We've got an awesome show this week, and I guarantee you it'll make you a better bass fisherman. If you like fishing Texas rigs off plastic baits after a strong cold front, then Stacey King has some advice. If you think you're fishing too slow, slow down. He'll show us as we go in depth. Then this week, Clunn describes how fish react to increased fishing pressure. It's the art of angling. But first, Kevin VanDam fishing his favorite swim bait, something he can reel extremely quick and it catches big fish. It's this week's Fishing in 4.
Oh golly, there's a big one. You know, today is really kind of the day that I really think of using a swim bait. It's kind of cloudy and there's a little bit of wind blowing. Most swim baits, they're so slow, the fish get such a good look at them, but this bait right here, it's one of those that I can reel fast if I need to, and that's what I'm doing. You know, smallmouths especially, they're triggered by those faster retrieves, but he's still, he just got that bait. King shad. In my career as a bass fisherman, swim baits have probably been the most intriguing new lure to come out that I've had a hard time with. It's kind of a love-hate relationship. You know, one day they eat them and the next day they just follow them. And you know, I've tried a lot of different kinds, the plastic ones, you know, the hard baits, the big ones, the little ones, and I've had some unbelievable success with them, but I've also been frustrated a lot of times. And all the swim baits that I've ever fished, you had to reel them slow, and that's what I really worked on, is trying to find a bait that I could speed up and try to, you know, trigger some of these fish that just follow into reacting to the bait and actually eating it. So the swim baits have come a long ways in the last few years. There is a good one too. God, he ate it. All I did was burn that thing along and then kill it. And that's been my problem with swim baits in the past, is I wasn't able to do that to trigger that reaction strike. That's what you throw swim baits for right there, to catch fish like that. He swallowed it too. I mean, I burned it and I'm sure he was chasing it and he just ran into it. He had to either run into it or eat it. I love this bait right here because it's the perfect size to where you're not scaring away small ones, but it still appeals to big ones like that. I mean, he just got it. I like to throw these baits when I've got some type of cover that I can reel it over the top of that I think is holding the bass. They're tremendous over grass. That's what we're fishing here today. You know, any stick-ups or brush piles or standing timber, anything where you think there's some bass hanging in some cover that it's clear enough that they can see that bait, they'll come up and get it. Got it. Golly, just annihilated it. God, I was almost jerking it like a jerk bait. I've been experimenting with a lot of retrieves, and this bait stays tuned good, so you can do it a lot of different ways. You know, I was reeling it and stopping it, reeling it and stopping it. That's what I've always really found with jerk baits, is you really have to experiment with your retrieves. You know, smallmouth are real aggressive by nature and like erratic presentation, so you know, a fast start and stop motion is really what I'm looking for. So, you know, I'm throwing this on big equipment. It's a 7-foot 2-inch rod with a high-speed reel, and I'm using fluorocarbon line today because I want that bait to get down a little bit. You know, this is not a light line technique for sure, but fluorocarbon sinks, and even with 17 or 20-pound test, it'll still run down 3-4 feet deep. And that's what you throw those swim baits for right there. They're those great big ones. Look at that. We came up and just engulfed it. The color is pretty critical too. You know, they make it in a lot of different shad patterns. This gizzard shad color is real pretty for clear water. To me, it's a real natural looking shad pattern. It seems to be working real good today. King shad.
Stacey King's on a hot pattern in shallow water grass. Or he was until a nasty cold front blew in. When you don't have a choice, you have to adapt. The key, fish slowly. Stacey explains all as we go in depth.
I got that one. Man, come in here, baby. Look at there. Got it under his chin. I've had several bites right along there, and no, he didn't. He just had it. The hook was turned out. You can see how that hook, boy, that thing really nailed that fish. Folks, today I'm going to give you a little bit of in-depth information on Texas rig bass fishing. I talk about Texas rigs a lot because I really believe in the technique. I've been using it for 35, 40 years. I don't know how long, but a long time. I'm going to release this one back. And it's a wonderful technique for catching lots of bass and lots of big bass. It's real effective. You know, the last couple of years, the craze has been the shaky head worm. Well, that's a great technique when you're fishing gravel or rock or something like that. But when you're around a lot of cover like I am here today, or around wood cover, a Texas rig with that pointed nose sinker is the best way to get it through the cover and the best way to catch those big bass. My initial plan when I came down here was to get out on the big lake and catch these pre-spawn spawn fish out on the grass flats. And we've had these cold fronts come through, 2 back-to-back cold fronts, and the wind's just been blowing out of the north extremely hard for several days. So I've had to move into the canals to fish, find a place where I could fish at all. And we've got a canal here today that is loaded with bass, and I hope that I can get a few of them to bite. Typically in a situation like this, you know, early morning is not the best. The water temperature has dropped some overnight and those bass are not very active. But as the sun gets on the water, you can typically start getting some bites, and hopefully that's what's going to happen to us today. You know, a technique that we use a lot in a pre-spawn or a spawn type situation like I'm fishing right now is just basically a dead stick technique. And what that is, it's just you throw the bait out there and you just let it lay there on the bottom. I like to raise my rod tip up and just kind of keep just a little tension on the line so I can feel it if one picks it up. And what I like to do is just tighten up on it a little bit and just kind of hold it and let it sit there. Sometimes you leave it sitting there for as long as a minute or maybe even more, and then I'll just take 1 or 2 turns on the reel handle and barely move that bait with my rod tip. Just move it maybe 6 inches, 12 inches, something like that. Then you let it fall back to the bottom. Then I'll move it maybe just a little bit more, maybe 1 or 2 turns, let it sit again. Then I'll bring it in and make another cast, because you've thrown it into the potential strike zone or where you think that bedding fish or that fish that's thinking about bedding is going to be. So you don't need to drag it all the way back to the boat. And it's really an effective technique when these bass are in this mode. And a lot of times all of a sudden you'll just feel tink, and boy, he'll start moving off with it. And that's when you catch that big fish. And do it slow. Slow's the key to getting that strike. Oh, come on. Oh, I missed him. Oh, I missed him. Oh, I missed him. Missed him. Oh. Oh. Boy, that felt like a heavy fish. Got him. Oh, yes. Oh, come on. Ah. Oh. Boy, that one is strong. Man. Come in here. Had to give that thing to him a little bit longer. Seemed like I've been missing quite a few of them. I know a lot of them are little fish, but I let that one take it. He come running right out at me with it and got him right through the top of the lip. That's the way you want to hook them right there. They won't come off if you get them stuck like that. Go back. They seem to like that old blue lizard this morning, black and blue lizard. It's always a good pre-spawn color. that black and blue lizard, especially when your water is a little bit off color, or a little tannic-y like this is right here, tannic acid, kind of reddish looking.
Fishing grass lakes can be extremely tough when a cold front blows through. I had the same type of experience on Lake Okeechobee a few years back in an event where I was catching 30 and 40 fish a day burning a gambler cane toad over matted vegetation. The next day of the event, the front blew in. I couldn't get a bite. I thought the fish had left the area completely. After I scrambled around and didn't catch anything, I slowed way down extremely. So I threw that gambler ace in there and just kind of let it soak in those same holes of that vegetation. I didn't get as many bites, but I still ended up catching fish where other guys didn't.
Oh yeah, come in here. That's a good one there. Come up here. He hit that old big lizard. I'd been catching him on a 6-inch one and I put an 8-inch one on it. He nailed it. Be still, be still. Pretty fish. Oh, there he is. Pretty big fish. Come here, fella. That one hit that thing on the fall. I just dropped it right by the pad, and I mean, it hadn't fallen about 2 inches, and thump, boy, one ticked it. And he got it. You know, all the time people are asking me, how do you feel a strike on a plastic worm? Sometimes you'll feel a tap tap or thump thump and you'll know it's a bite right off the bat. But a lot of times you'll just feel weight there, or maybe you'll see your line moving to the side. But the key is don't worry too much about it. If you pull up against something and you're not sure it's a fish, just kind of give it a little bit of slack. Get your rod down in this position and tighten up on it again and just hold it there. And if you feel it moving, it's a bass. If it doesn't move, more than likely it's a rock or a stick or something like that. But if you feel it move, then come on down, pop, set the hook hard in him. That's the main thing. You just want to, you know, they're not going to lay it down most of the time. Most of these bass, when they get that plastic in their mouth, they're going to hold on to it. So you don't need to worry too much about them letting go of it. An angler has to determine when to set the hook at the proper time with a soft plastic bait. The key to that is getting on water and getting a few bites and seeing what the fish are doing. If they're real aggressive, if you get a strike and he starts off with that thing immediately, all you got to do is drop your rod and set the hook. I prefer to set the hook fast with a Texas rig if I can. But you know, if you're in a cold front situation like I am here today, a lot of times you'll feel that bass hit it. He may hit it real good and hard. You'll drop your rod down, get ready to set the hook, and he's gone. So a lot of times you've got to test it. Let him take the bait a little bit. When I feel one, I'll drop the rod down, I'll watch my line, I'll just ease back up, and if I feel him a little bit, I may let him move off a little bit with it before I set the hook. Yeah, you just have to let the fish tell you what to do. So get out there and get a few strikes and go from there. But the key is test that thing and make sure before you set the hook. I'm going to show the way I like to rig a Texas rig bait. It's pretty simple, but there's a few new twists and turns in this from the old days that really make it a lot easier and a lot better way to fish it, I think. First thing I do is put one of these bobber stops on the line. I can keep it pegged right against the nose of my bait. That keeps your sinker from sliding forward on your line, and if you're fishing around a lot of cover, your sinker will take the bait down through the cover a lot easier. And if the sinker's free on the line, a lot of times the sinker will get hooked up on a piece of grass or up on a piece of brush, or maybe the sinker will go down, your bait will get hooked up on it, so you don't get your bait down to where it needs to be. So you want that thing punched up against the nose of your bait good. And so then I'll slide a slip sinker on the line next to the bobber stop like this. And I use the tungsten weights. I really believe in them because they're smaller in diameter than lead weights. And there's two reasons I like them. They go through cover better, and also when they're in the fish's mouth and you set the hook, you can move them a lot easier than you can a big bulky piece of lead, and that way you'll get a better hook set. The next thing I do, I put a little deal on the line called it's called a parasite clip. A guy named Chuck Ditto up in Illinois came up with that a couple of years ago, and it's really a neat little deal to hold your bait in place. You know, you're always having your bait sliding down on your hook. This thing holds it in place, and it gets you a lot better hookups on your bass. Your bait stays in position, you get better hookups. Then I tie the hook on. And what I'll do is I'll take this piece of plastic, this lizard, I'll show you how I rig it up. I put it in there, I run it down in the bait just about 3/8 of an inch, something like that. Run it up till it's set good in the crook in the hook. And then I'll take this little clip, and it has a little, one side of it is open. And actually what I'd like to do, I like to just put it over the point of the hook like that, and you can see it comes in, and then I'll just go ahead and Texas rig my bait like you normally would, like this. And that little clip holds that bait in place, holds that, and you can't pull that down off of there without tearing it in half. And it really helps you get good hookups. Slide that little bobber stop down against it, and you got a bait that'll go down through cover good, the bait stays on the hook good, and you get good hookups with it. Oh, small one. No, it isn't either. It's a pretty good fish. Coming at me, I thought he was a little fella. Not bad, not bad. The size is picking up on that bigger lizard. Oh, yes. Come in here. What we're looking for right there, be still, be still. I love to feel that thing go tink. Then that line starts moving off to the side, release her back.
Up next, Rick Clunn describes how increased fishing pressure on today's waters and GPS can actually help you become a more successful angler. It's this week's Art of Angling.
In the past, myself and others really understood that, you know, the weather conditions, the water conditions, and other variables were the most important things you had to understand about catching fish. In recent history, though, in the last 5 years or so, I've really noticed and believe now that the #1 variable in the future to catching fish will be fishing pressure itself. I've seen it now in the last 10 years increase dramatically, where we have as much traffic in the middle of the week as we used to have on a holiday weekend. The thing that probably has affected that as much as anything is really maybe GPS has accelerated that process. The depth finder started it because it gave us the freedom to get offshore and get out here in some of these deep water sanctuaries that the rest of us people didn't want to fish, couldn't fish. But GPS has really made it easy. The depth finder, you still had to spend weeks, maybe months out there finding these spots, where now almost any map that's of a lake map nowadays, it has the GPS coordinates for all these really intricate creek channel intersections and underwater road beds and underwater humps, and now all you got to do is put the coordinates in and go straight to them. That still doesn't necessarily mean you're going to catch fish. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be intimate with that spot, but at the same time it has really cut down the amount of time it takes to find these type of spots. So thus it's putting a lot more pressure on what used to be underfished areas of the lake. So how you deal with that in the future is going to be very, very important. Now you're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to do what I call fishing the fringe of GPS. And it's similar to when people go deer hunting. They go in the woods on the opening day of season, and the more people there in the woods, the more pressure it puts on the deer, and the deer move away from it. They're going to move out into the fringe areas. They're going to move into the thicker cover. They're going to try to get away from it, and bass are no different. And I don't necessarily mean physically, and sometimes it's technique. You go to more finesse techniques on those spots because these fish see certain techniques, so you've got to develop different techniques the fish don't see to catch these fish. Sometimes actually though, you can do things like when these fish move off, give them something to move to. Put brush piles out away from the sweet spot that everybody's fishing. So these fish move away from them, you actually pull the fish off from them, and now you can fish these areas, because these fish like these areas for a reason. There's something that's always held these fish there and always will. So now you're just allowing them to have a secondary place to move to when they feel all that pressure. That type of thing can help you be more successful. Certainly GPS is going to make it easier in the future for people to find these type of spots, but you still have to be smarter about how you fish these spots.